Hey Raiders fans, do you guys remember me? I know it's been a while, but in the off season, a lot of you guys got really mad because I said that you guys were not going to make the playoffs. You were going to have a losing season. And many of you guys called me an idiot. You said I knew nothing about football. And I felt like this was the perfect time to come on here and give my thoughts on the Las Vegas Raiders season after losing to the Colts 25-20. And not only did they just lose to the Indianapolis Colts, but they lost to interim head coach Jeff Saturday. It's funny because a week ago, Jeff Saturday was like me and you watching games from his couch. However, he also was working as an analyst for ESPN. And a week later, who would have thought after all the scrutiny that Jim Irsay and the Indianapolis Colts organization received for their decision to make Jeff Saturday their interim head coach, and yet they end up winning. And everybody's, knock on the Colts' decision to make Jeff Saturday their interim head coach wasn't because of Jeff Saturday. Everybody loved Jeff Saturday. It's just that there is a lot of time, devotion, and dedication that goes into being an NFL head coach. Most of these coaches don't see their families because they don't go home. They live in their office. They sleep in their office. They bathe in their office. And hell, they might even cook in their office. So for Jeff Saturday to come in his first game ever being an NFL head coach at this level and being able to beat Josh McDaniels and the Raiders, that is a huge indictment on the Raiders and this coaching staff. Derek Carr and his press conference after this game is breaking down in tears. He said that we put our bodies through hell just to go to sleep. And yet, for all of the preparation and time that we put in day after day, week after week, to have the result that the Raiders had in this game really was upsetting to Derek Carr. And I don't blame him. Losing to an ESPN analyst would have me upset too. And I understand that Raiders fans are going to pull JT, this isn't anybody. This is Jeff Saturday. This is a Hall of Fame center. This is somebody who is one of the best to ever play the game. I can understand that. However, coaching just is not something that you just pick up and do. It doesn't matter how good of a player you were. Just because you were a good player doesn't mean you're going to be a good coach. And as a matter of fact, who can come in mid-season and lead a team to a win with no NFL coaching experience? Do you not know how bad of a loss this looks for Josh McDaniels? Like, you Raiders fans, how can you even defend this? It doesn't matter how many injuries you had, how many guys out you had missing. You lost to somebody who had no experience ever being an NFL head coach. And I was talking to one of my friends, because I picked the Raiders to win this game. And I was like, bro, no way the Raiders are going to lose to the Colts, right? He was like, bruh, it's the Raiders. And I was like, you're right. If there was any team to lose to an interim head coach that used to be an ESPN analyst, it would be the Raiders. Since these ESPN analysts are having so much success now, they know how to win football games. You know what the Raiders should do? Maybe they should fire Josh McDaniels and hire Stephen A. Smith to be the interim head coach for the rest of the season. Maybe, hell, I don't see what could go wrong. You can't look no worse than how you look now. What's funny is that I think the Raiders had their head coaching candidate in-house already. And they let him walk away. It was Rich. I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name, but we're going to call him Coach Rich. And Coach Rich last year, throughout all the turmoil that the Las Vegas Raiders had with John Gruden, Henry Ruggs, and despite getting out to a hot start and getting cold throughout the middle of the season, the Raiders, led by head coach Rich, were able to make it to the playoffs for the first time in a very long time. And yet, they decided, we're going to discard the interim head coach who led us to the playoffs, helped turn our season around, and we're going to hire Josh McDaniels, a former losing head coach. I just didn't really understand that. Not to mention that head coach Rich actually has done something that Josh McDaniels has not been able to do. And that's one, produce a winning season, and two, lead a team to the postseason. He did that, and he wasn't even the head coach for a full year. You would have thought that the Raiders would bring him back, or if they were not going to bring him back, at least have the guy they were going to hire with a better resume. I mean, Josh McDaniels' resume prior to taking this Raiders job is nothing but he was the offensive coordinator for the New England Patriots. That's it. So, I mean, for the Las Vegas Raiders, they're a mess. This team is a disaster. You know, I saw a rumor earlier by JPA Football. He posted on his Twitter, and it said that the Raiders could move on from Derek Carr at the end of the season, and they could go after Ohio State quarterback CJ Stroud if he declares for the draft. However, I went to click on this tweet for more clarification, and it got deleted. But that's out there. I'm just letting it known it's out there. For the Raiders, this franchise needs a rebuild. They need a new coaching staff. They need a new GM. They need a new quarterback. They need a new everything. And I'm not somebody who is in favor of a rebuild. I'm not somebody who likes tearing everything down, trading away everybody. But I just think for the Raiders, you know, Derek Carr has been there for a very long time. And a lot of these players, you know, I just don't really think that they really fit. I mean, we see how bad the previous regime was. Mike Mayock and John Gruden were at player acquisition and roster management and building up a championship roster. Bro, most of the Raiders' first-round draft picks aren't even on the team. I think the only one still remaining is Josh Jacobs. And they declined his fifth-year option before the season started. So, this team has a roster full of guys who were brought in by coaches and general managers who didn't really know how to properly construct a roster. You just don't bring guys in just to bring guys in. You have to bring guys in who fit the mold of the kind of locker room that you want to have. And the Raiders had a bunch of guys in that locker room under John Gruden and Mike Mayock who didn't have great character, and they weren't great locker room guys. And the thing is that you look at Josh McDaniels and the new GM they have, you know, it still is a lot of the same. You still have a lot of guys who seem like they're not a fit for that locker room. And not just that, but you got a lot of guys there who the Raiders acquired who they didn't really need. Did the Raiders really need to give out as much as they did for Devontae Adams when they had so many other glaring needs? Did they really have to pay Chandler Jones all that money in free agency when they could have drafted somebody in the later rounds of the draft, or maybe signed somebody for just as less of a price tag of Chandler Jones? And Chandler Jones is up in his 30s. And I understand that he still is a very good player, but I mean, you could have done so much more with the money you dished out to Chandler Jones. You trade for Devontae Adams, I understand it, but at the same time, you just have so many other needs. Was Devontae Adams really the difference between the Las Vegas Raiders making it to a Super Bowl and not making it to a Super Bowl? I don't think so. The Raiders are a disaster. This roster still is awful. The general manager and Josh McDaniels still don't know what they're doing. Same thing with Mike Mayock and John Gruden. They didn't really know what they were doing. And same thing with the previous other general managers and head coaches that have came and gone throughout this organization. Nobody really knows what they're doing. And it's pretty evident that nobody knows what they're doing because you just lost to a guy who was an ESPN analyst a week ago. And I respect that Jeff Saturday was one of the best centers to ever play this game. But the dude had no head coaching experience on a professional level. And yet, you let his debut be a win. Really disappointing to see the Las Vegas Raiders at this state right now. And I'm not even a Raiders fan. And I just really feel bad for what the fans have to endure right now. And before the season started, I was starting to believe that maybe I was a little bit wrong about this team. Maybe this team could surprise me. But this team still has the same problems that they have had for over a decade and some change. How many years has the secondary been a problem for the Raiders? When is the last time the Raiders have even had an elite defense? I can't remember. And we thought that Patrick Graham was going to be a fantastic hire at DC for the Raiders. I mean, the dude had a pretty good amount of success with Joe Judge in New York. And even though the Giants defense wasn't good last season, I mainly think it was due to the fact of the coaching staff with Joe Judge kind of wasn't great. And the players had given up on the season. I didn't think it was too much of an indictment against Patrick Graham. But you look at how this defense has played this season, and it kind of looks worse than what it was last year. And as a matter of fact, it is worse than what it was last year because last year, your defense actually played really good during the second half. It was a big reason why you were able to get to the playoffs. So for Patrick Graham, it's really surprising that the defense has been so bad under him. Because this is somebody who many people, myself included, had held in high regard. Many people view Patrick Graham as one of the more innovative defensive minds in the game. But the Raiders are just a complete disaster, a dumpster fire, however you want to call them, on all fronts. This team needs a rebuild. They need some fresh blood in this organization. They need to burn this thing down and build it from the ground up again. Because this franchise has been built up upon years and years and years of mediocrity and disappointment. And the roster they have right now has been constructed by guys who know nothing but losing and mediocrity. Nobody that they've brought into this organization has won anything so far. I mean, they're 2-7. And it looks like their chances of making it to the postseason are all but over. Unless they can find a way to run the table. Which, let's be honest, that's probably not going to happen. Changes have to be made. I think a rebuild has to be taken. Or a rebuild has to be done. I mean, something has to change. Because the Raiders are a mess. This team doesn't know how to draft. They don't really know how to build a winning culture or winning team. Let me know how you guys feel about the Las Vegas Raiders down in the comment section down below. Make sure that you guys check out the JT Sports Podcast, available on all podcasting platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. Make sure that you like the video and subscribe to the channel for more NFL videos and content.